What is up, Hawk fans? Have more news for you guys for out of the transfer portal, rather. The news just really keeps tumbling down. I've had to do multiple videos in the last couple of days, both on the basketball and football side of things. Iowa just received a commitment today, January 9th, from former Chattanooga wide receiver, 5'9", Sam Phillips. This was really the only remaining wide receiver name on the board that Iowa was attached to that could realistically come to Iowa and make an immediate impact. There were several names that Iowa was linked to since the end of the regular season. And unfortunately, Iowa got some visits from some of them, but it didn't work out. I mean, some of the names, there was the North Dakota State, I believe, wide receiver. It was either North Dakota or North Dakota State wide receiver. There was, suffice it to say, I just did some research. There was a lot. There was Idaho transfer Jordan Dwyer. I think that's who I was thinking of rather than a North Dakota State guy, because I looked up North Dakota State and North Dakota. I couldn't find anybody. There were two Northern Illinois wide receivers, Trayvon Rudolph, who ended up committing to San Diego State. And most recently, probably an even more explosive target, Cam Thomas, who committed to Mississippi State. Iowa had visits lined up and or received visits from most of these guys, but they really were struggling to gain any traction with wide receivers. They would be linked to some guys, and at times it was veering on Iowa might even be the favorite, but in the end, they chose to go elsewhere. It was kind of like last year where Iowa lost the transfer Raylon Sharp from Missouri State to, I believe, either UNLV or Fresno State. Just really struggling. Fresno State, I was right. And so I've told you guys time and time again, it's not the money. It is that Iowa does not have any track record of success in the last 5 years at the wide receiver position. If anything, they have a negative track of success with guys transferring out and leaving Iowa and having varied levels of success. You have Keegan Johnson, who has done okay at Kansas State. I think he did hit the transfer portal again. Arland Bruce, of course, landed at Oklahoma State, but because of the gambling probe, that died on the vine. You had, the guy that ended up going to Purdue, Charlie Jones, and having 1,000+ yard receiving season. By the way, Keegan Johnson is hit the transfer portal again after having decent success. I wouldn't say any more than he had when he was at Iowa in his first couple of seasons. He is now at New Mexico. So what is Iowa getting? Well, let me just put a bow on this. Iowa was struggling, and that is going to continue to be the case. It's now a little bit better now that Iowa does have a proven quarterback in Mark Gronowski. But make no mistake, it is still going to be difficult, not because of NIL, not because Iowa doesn't have money, but because there is not a proven track record, or really like any success at all, really, that's average to above average in the passing game. And as Iowa fans, we have to ask ourselves, what wide receiver that has had any sort of success that has other colleges after him is, and I've said this in previous videos, is going to want to play at Iowa. What would signify to them that playing at Iowa would be fun or that they would have any success? There isn't any. It's a hope and a prayer with Tim Lester, and then also now Mark Gronowski, which is good. It's better than it was. And I do think that is a huge reason why Iowa was able to land Chattanooga wide receiver Sam Phillips. This is a solid get. Iowa gets an immediate impact wide receiver. I think that this is probably the best wide receiver Iowa has landed in the transfer portal since Caleb Brown. And I would even say it might be slightly better than Caleb Brown. The three main wide receivers that Iowa has landed in the transfer portal has been Jacob Gill, who was Iowa's leading receiver last year. But again, it's not like, comparatively speaking, he killed it. Seth Anderson, which has kind of had an up and down career at Iowa, and it's kind of looking, which I'll circle back to, like he's kind of falling back a lot. Caleb Brown, and now Sam Phillips, okay? I think that just not counting their time at Iowa, Sam Phillips is probably the most ready to compete right away with potentially, I would put Caleb Brown and just like what they looked like coming out of into the transfer portal and committing to Iowa, and Seth Anderson. Seth Anderson did put together a decent year for the school that he was at prior to being at Iowa, Charleston something. It's hard to remember all the schools that these guys go to. So let's see the stats that Sam Phillips had last year at Chattanooga. 49 receptions, 803 yards. And he also graded pretty good according to Pro Football Focus. I mean, that is legit production. I think he's going to come to Iowa primarily as a slot receiver, as he is kind of a smaller guy in stature at 5'9". But Iowa really has been looking for a game changer in the slot position. And for a pro-style offense, modern pro-style offense, you need a productive slot receiver that can open up the outside through short to intermediate passes that build up to something more throughout the game. Let's read this from 247 Sports. Phillips picked the Hawkeyes over Virginia Tech, East Carolina, and Cal, among others. USC and Memphis were also involved with Phillips during the process. He has 1 year of eligibility remaining. He had 49 catches for 803 yards and 3 scores this fall for the Mokes. Over the course of 3 seasons, he has 153 catches for 2,088 yards and 10 touchdowns. I thought I read something else that he was... Oh, actually, it's right here. It should be right here. How he fits. The Hawkeyes are looking to add more speed to the roster, and Phillips is a nice fit in the Hawkeyes offense, mainly in the slot. Something that Iowa has lacked this season was a slot receiver that could be effective in short routes and as a playmaker after the catch. And Phillips would help bring that dynamic to the offense. He graded out at an excellent 82.4 offensive level in 2024 per Pro Football Focus, with a single drop pass on 78 targets. So 1 drop pass per 78 targets. He lined up 84.1% of the time this past season out wide for passing plays for Chattanooga and 15.9% of the time in the slot. That said, Phillips seems like more of a fit in the slot receiver spot for the Hawkeyes, as Iowa does not have a slot on the roster who has played significant, it says spots, but snaps. But that's not true. I mean, Seth Anderson over the last 2 years has played a decent amount. Now, the problem with Seth Anderson is he's kind of a tweener. He's kind of a Z, but he's also kind of a slot at 6 foot. But he also doesn't have like Amir Smith-Marset breakaway speed for the Z, where he can be kind of in that intermediate to long route tree range. So we'll see what happens with that. I think the biggest thing for Seth Anderson, I actually do like him as a prospect, is his ability to stay healthy. We'll see if he ends up staying at Iowa. I think there's a good chance that he transfers out, unfortunately, but hopefully he stays. Phillips seems like more of a fit on the slot receiver. Iowa has a lot of length at receiver with Reese Vanderzee, Dayton Howard, and incoming freshman Terrence Smith, who's a 4-star by On3 recruiting, along with Jarriett Bowie and Jacob Gill, who are more Z receivers and quality wideouts, but don't have the height of the others. Tim's Leicester offense has relied a lot on speed with receivers, and that's something that Phillips can add in the slot. Phillips has shown he can get yards after the catch and be a threat in quick routes. That's an area where the Hawkeyes would like to improve in the quick passing game. He would likely be thrusted into a starting role for the Hawkeyes, or at least a main part of the rotation. So his rating out of the transfer portal, let's see here, is a 88 according to On3 and an 85 according to 247 Sports. You guys know I lean more towards On3 personally. So that is his rating. ESPN and Rival. ESPN doesn't do transfer portal. Rivals does not have a rating for him. So where does he fit in this Iowa offense? Well, I agree with 247 Sports. I think he comes in and is going to be a starter. I guarantee that is what the Hawkeyes sold him, or the chance to compete for the starting spot. I actually doubt Iowa would guarantee a starting spot for anybody. That's just kind of not their style. But at the very least, he will compete for snaps. I'm just pulling up Iowa's depth chart here. So at the X, Reese Vanderzee was the starter for much of the year, with Jarriett Bowie getting some spot duty there as well. But personally, I think Jarriett Bowie is more traditionally a Z, which he also played a lot of snaps at. Jacob Gill played the Z as well as playing some slot. Dayton Howard is listed as a Z, but I think he's more of an X. I kind of don't understand kind of where Iowa has all these guys listed, because X does usually tend to be more of a possession, big-bodied wide receiver. And at the slot, it has Seth Anderson at the 1, Caden Wetchton at the 2, and Terrell Washington Jr. at the 3. So if I had to guess right now what the starting package for Iowa will look like next year, it will be Reese Vanderzee at the X, Jacob Gill at the Z, and Sam Phillips / Seth Anderson at the slot. Those will be the two main guys. And the alternates for Iowa will, of course, be Dayton Howard, Jarriett Bowie, Caden Wetchton, more so at the slot, maybe some Z with his speed, and Terrell Washington Jr. as well, mostly a slot receiver. We'll see how incoming freshman Terrence Smith factors into the equation, but I think Iowa has more than enough pieces, more than enough options. I think he'll probably redshirt in his freshman year. Again, this is assuming nobody transfers out. I think Iowa's wide receiver room, even without Sam Phillips, I was much higher on the room than a lot of people are. They have a lot of experience coming back, a lot of athleticism, a lot of variability, It used to be a problem that Iowa did not have anybody who could play that was a big-bodied wide receiver at the X. They now have multiple options there. It was always going to be difficult for Iowa to find an X receiver in the transfer portal because usually those guys are extremely sought after. And so I think Iowa, even without Sam Phillips, I thought that this was going to be the best that this wide receiver room has looked going into an offseason or a season. Again, depending on who hopefully nobody decides to transfer, that we've seen since Amir Smith-Marset, Brandon Smith, and Tyrone Tracy days. So I don't think that there's any excuse why Tim Lester cannot improve the passing game next year. He's got multiple options at the wide receiver position as well as at the tight end spot. He's got pieces, okay? Iowa has had a lot less on the offensive side of the football before. Believe that. Does Iowa go after another wide receiver? Sure. I mean, I'm sure Iowa, if another person becomes available that they think they have a shot at landing, they'll go after. But if I had to guess, I would say, given their swings and misses on a lot of guys, the more likely possibility is to land a guy that has multiple years of eligibility, that is younger, that does not have as many suitors as more of an established college receiver, that Iowa can get into the rotation, develop, work on, and shape into a productive wide receiver for the Hawkeyes. But I mean, the room is pretty full at this point, and I think they're good. One final thought: this is not going to be. Actually, this might be the transfer portal update on part 5. I would grade Iowa's efforts in the transfer portal this year a B, close to a B+. The addition of Mark Gronowski and Sam Phillips has really elevated my viewpoint of their transfer portal haul. I think that there's a good chance that this transfer portal haul ends up being more productive than the one that Iowa landed with Eric All, Cade McNamara, Caleb Brown, Rusty Feth, Nick Jackson. Of course, Nick Jackson was the most productive of all those guys. Rusty Feth did pretty good. Eric All, when he was healthy, did okay. Cade McNamara played, but it was subpar. I think that this group, production-wise, could be just as good. On a ratings perspective, this group is just as solidly ranked. I would say that group was probably ranked a little bit higher with the likes of Cade McNamara, who was probably overrated. Caleb Brown, he was only a year removed from high school where he was a top 100 player in the country. And that's the thing that you guys have to understand about the transfer portal ratings is it's very hard to rank, and these industries are getting better and better at it, but it's still a work in progress because it's not a one size fits all. Some guys have had zero production in college, but they're only a year removed from high school in which they were highly rated, like a Caleb Brown. Okay? Some guys, for whatever reason, these recruiting services don't watch a lot of their tape, but they actually do have a lot of college production, and they're actually under-recruited. Some guys, like a Cade McNamara, come from a really strong school that has had strong success, but as far as them as an actual player and evaluating them as an actual player outside of that school, they're probably a bit overvalued. So that's kind of the tough thing about looking at the transfer portal ratings, okay? I take the transfer portal ratings with a grain of salt. I feel more comfortable evaluating them myself because I'm an Iowa fan and I have an invested interest at them being successful. And thus, I can take a more critical eye at the talent. And I think all four of these guys, Jonah Pace, defensive tackle, let's just go one by one, okay? The two defensive line gets. I think both of them will compete for snaps. I think Jonah Pace is probably, between Bryce Hawthorne and Jonah Pace, I think Jonah Pace is probably more likely to get the starting nod or compete for immediate rotational snaps. But both these guys, I could see being in the rotation next year. Both of these guys. Long term, Bryce Hawthorne, I think, will be potentially a starter on the defensive line as soon as the year after this one. And this is actually, in 247 Sports, graded him as an 88. He was a freshman All-American in the FCS ranks. This is a guy that is an extremely under-the-radar get. You know, he has 3 years of eligibility remaining, and Lord knows what Iowa can do with that amount of time as far as development goes. You look at on the offensive side, Iowa got an NFL caliber quarterback in Mark Gronowski, who literally was considering going to the NFL this year. And looking at his highlights, I really like his highlights. He has a cannon. He's athletic. He's big. In fact, I'm surprised there weren't more schools after him, considering how successful he's been in winning football games. And then you have Sam Phillips. You know, all of these guys I can see being pretty much immediate contributors, if not a year removed from now. Basically only for the Bryce Hawthorne. Now, a majority of the guys that Iowa has landed are guys that are one-and-done type guys. And I'm okay with that. You know, there will be more guys on the table for Iowa to evaluate here in the coming weeks that are younger, that have multiple years of eligibility, that they might be willing to take a chance on. The problem with that is that when you're looking at a guy like that has very little production at the college level, you're almost just as well off finding guys out of the high school rank that will have 4 years of eligibility remaining and a red shirt that you can take more time to evaluate than grabbing a guy who has zero college production. You don't even know if he truly can play at the college level yet. You think he might be able to, but you are taking a waiver on him a little bit, and you're kind of projecting him long term. You're almost better off just going in the high school ranks and getting guys that have even more eligibility remaining. But I'm not completely against taking younger prospects. When I say, younger prospects, I'm saying guys that have at least 2 years of eligibility remaining, at least, if not 3, if not 4, due to a red shirt. So, these are, Iowa went out. I say all this to say Iowa went into the transfer portal with the expressed interest of finding guys that can immediately impact next year's roster. And I'm okay with that. I think that by and large, that is the correct mindset to have. So at this point, I would go B, close to a B+. I'd probably even lean towards a B+ because I like how aggressive Iowa has been. And it shows that they are open to evolving. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you guys think about this pickup. Do you think that this will be a fruitful addition for the Iowa Hawkeyes and for Sam Phillips? I know there's definitely going to be some of you guys that are not overly optimistic about a wide receiver coming to Iowa and having any sort of production, and I understand it. Believe you me, I understand. All right, guys, last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy, rule out facts or feelings because your feelings just don't matter. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment. You guys know the drill, and go Hawks. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.